Coffee, wake up, and hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Gilmore Way podcast. I'm Kate.
And I'm Laura. And this week we're looking at Rory through Mitchum's eyes. Was he right about her prospects as a journalist? His criticism of her in season 5 initially comes off as horrible and harsh, and he does come off as a real jerk and quite a bit of a villain. But by the revival, many of us were left questioning whether or not we should reappraise his comments and his character. Don't hesitate to tell us how you feel in the comments below, because we know that Mitchum is a very divisive character. And there are a lot of people who have passionate opinions about him, about what he has said to Rory, and we definitely want to hear yours.
And while you're down in the comments section, you might as well smash that like button on your way in, because it's super fast and it really does help us out, and we really appreciate it when you do. This is also your last chance to get out of here if you do not want spoilers. We are talking about everything, including the later seasons and the revival in this episode. So don't say you haven't been warned.
Indeed. I want to start off with just a very basic blanket question that is a yes or no answer. And then obviously we will back up our responses to this throughout this episode, because this is the focus of what we're talking about this week. But was Mitchum right in what he said to Rory, and how he was? Don't hesitate. I mean, don't take some time to think about it. But yeah, it was going to be yes or no. Was Mitchum right about Rory with what he says to her in season 5?
Yes. Yes, he was. And we're going to spend this whole episode proving it to you.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh, 1,000%. Okay. It is a blanket.
I figured.
It's a blanket yes for both of us across the board. But I just
the yes from me, dog.
2 thumbs up. Woot woot. Golden buzzer for you called it. We will spend this episode defending that reasoning and why we think that he was absolutely correct in that perception. He rolled a nat 20 on that one. But I just wanted to start us off with allowing our audience to know where we stand.
Yes, the thesis statement of this episode is Mitchum was absolutely correct about Rory Gilmore.
Indeed.
Okay, I want to start us off with sort of like a rundown of Mitchum's credits to set the stage for his expertise and why he's even qualified to give the feedback that he does, because Lorelai brings it into question by asking if he even knows Rory and who is he to make these all-knowing proclamations. We'll get to her whole reaction to this in a minute. But when Rory's talking to Logan just on the eve of starting this internship, she Googles him, and there are like 12,000 hits. And I don't know that I've clocked this before. 2nd of 4 children, oldest boy, which absolutely corroborates our theory that like women are not in contention for carrying the Huntzberger mantle ever. So sorry, Honor. Too bad, so sad. But yeah, Yale undergrad, star of the track team, no grad school. Interesting. Then he had a couple of lost years, kind of a blank period, a little Jesus thing going on there. Worked as a reporter and editor for 2 of the Huntzberger papers before taking over as CEO of the company. He's written about everything from foreign affairs, domestic policies. He had a wine column, for God's sake. He's unbelievably neutral in his writing. Right wing, left wing, middle wing. Oh, the man was shortlisted for the Pulitzer for covering the Iranian hostage crisis when he was 25. How did he do that? Especially considering his lost years. He's a born journalist. And these are words out of Rory Gilmore's own mouth from her extensive Google search of this guy. So, I think it's important to remember his background when we're thinking about whether or not he's just straight up being an ass to her in this moment, whether he has a leg to stand on in offering this kind of criticism. And I think those accolades absolutely entitle him to knowing what he's talking about just a little bit. He is a born journalist. He was raised to be the Huntzberger heir, much like Logan. Logan's also intelligent and talented, but maybe just doesn't have the same drive that Mitchum had. And I think the most impressive was obviously the Pulitzer nomination at age 25. What was Rory doing at age 25? If she's so good, why is she not getting the same accolades and opportunities? Is it just the nepotism?
No, it's laziness. And a lack of motivation and drive, but we will get there. But you're absolutely right. Like, this wasn't just asking Joe Schmo down the street, like, hey, do you think Rory's got it? This is a man that has decades long experience, who, again, has been nominated for awards and accolades, who is running multiple productions at this point, who is being brought in to advise on papers, who is the CEO of multiple corporations and companies at this point in time. Again, this isn't even asking, like, oh, hey, Kate, like, you think Rory's got it? And we're obviously speculating on that, but we don't have the credentials that Mitchum Huntzberger does. He was absolutely well within his rights to pass that sort of judgment because he had the experience to back up what he was noticing in her. And this is, again, a follow-up question that I want to ask you, and something that we can talk about either now or tangentially. But it strikes me that Rory, in the lead up to this internship, was investigating Mitchum Huntzberger solely, as opposed to the actual publication that you're about to go to work for. Like, and again, it's good to know who your boss is and maybe some general likes and dislikes, because you're going to need to have a rapport with them. But she just honed in on, who is this person? And, just quizzing Logan on, like, who's your father? What should I know about him? It's like, why don't you look at the history of this Stanford paper? When did it come into publication? Has anybody noteworthy written for it? Has it come out with any just really groundbreaking articles or stories over time that were just noteworthy and did garner awards or accolades? Do some more research on your employer on the whole as the paper, as opposed to just Mitchum Huntzberger. And I want to ask, like, how much do you think that was a detriment to her? Because I think we can both agree that it probably was. But how much did that really put her in a hole going in, not even knowing the history of the job that she was heading into?
You make an excellent point. I think it was a big detriment and a blind spot of hers. Later on, Mitchum, when confronted by Richard, says that she lacked maturity, and I think that's demonstrative of that, because if she had more experience, more foresight, all of those things, more background info, I guess, or more education even on the topic. Maybe this isn't taught in her classes because Yale doesn't actually have a journalism major. Why are we here? Maybe she would have thought to do such a thing. But I think she was so caught up in sort of the glitz and glam of Mitchum himself, especially because she was dating his son, when she first is developing that interest in Logan, she's so taken by the idea of maybe being invited to New York to go to a newspaper party for Seymour Hersh. And she's got these delusions of grandeur and maybe thinks that sucking up to the CEO will help her get there. But like you said, it's not enough. There's more substantive issues at play when it comes to work. Like, I've never gone into a job and just Googled my boss. I'm like, what does this company even do? What are we doing here? How can I be a better employee? What do I need to know to thrive here and totally ace this job? And she did none of that.
No, it's 1,000%. And again, there was obviously nepotism that came into play, because you got this internship just as a benefit of knowing Logan. And we'll talk about how she was even given this internship and why she was presented with this opportunity, which was really the result of, like, just a guilt trip. But we'll talk about it. But regardless, even when she's presented with it, there's hesitancy initially, when it's like, why are you not diving into this opportunity? But when she is eventually on board with taking it, again, she's just pestering Logan about, like, this isn't an actual question that comes up. I'm just, for example, like, oh, is your father like a chicken or a beef type of dude? It's like, that's not what you want to be asking here going into this job. Again, like, what are the profit margins on this company that I'm working for? Like, why are their employees satisfied within this position or not? Like, what's the retention factor? There's a million other things that you should be looking into, as opposed to just What's Mitchum's religious background? He likes wine. How did that happen?
Yeah, for some reason we need to know he's an Episcopalian. But I think she doesn't need to have so much insight on the business itself because I don't think he expects that of her as an intern. I don't know how much of that would be publicly available to begin with. And as a writer, it wouldn't really be her concern. You know, the business is headed up by the Huntzberger group and certain other positions within each paper. She would be more concerned with the actual journalistic endeavor. But still, the point stands that Mitchum is the head of the conglomerate. He's just coming into this paper temporarily to get it up to speed with their other papers now that they've purchased it, just to make sure that they're doing okay. And so he's not going to be there forever. He's not there to hold Rory's hand. He's not there to teach her everything about the biz. She needs to know what she's doing. She needs to know why she's there. She needs to know what she has to do to actually contribute beyond just knowing that Mitchum drinks decaf after 4.
Yeah. And I agree. And I think that's, again, we'll talk about it, why Mitchum really saw that she was entering into this internship with the notion that you should be doing this to pursue your journalistic career path. But at the end of the day, if all you're asking is regular or decaf, like, that's not going to get you to where you need to be. I have more thoughts on that as well. But I kind of want to take us back to the start of this internship and talk about how it came to fruition, how she entered into being an intern for this paper, how she was presented with this opportunity, and why that was good or bad. So talk to us a little bit about, how did she even get this opportunity? Who gave it to her? And why was it maybe not the greatest, or perhaps in your opinion, the greatest start for her to have in terms of the nepotism behind it?
Yeah, obviously, Mitchum is the one who comes to the Yale Daily News and offers her this opportunity himself after his wife and his father embarrass Rory at a family dinner when she is brought around for the first time to the humble Huntzberger abode. um, you know, Shira and Elias are jerks to Rory, and Mitchum doesn't necessarily hold all of the same views that they do. He doesn't think it was fair how they treated her, and he does kind of just want to make it up to her and wants to give her an opportunity to prove her mettle. And so he goes to her at the Yale Daily News and offers this to her. And as you said, she hesitates because she thinks it's just being done out of pity or apology. And she doesn't want to get something that way, which I suppose has some sort of noble underpinnings, but I'm just like, it's an opportunity. And Mitchum makes that same point. When life gives you an opportunity, if it's something that you want, take it. If it's not, you know, then you can consider turning it down. But Rory wants to be a journalist, and here she is being handed an opportunity by one of the top guys in the business on a silver platter. And she's like, nah, I don't think I will because of how it looks. And so I think Mitchum tests her 3 times, and this is the first test, and she nearly fails it because she just thinks that he's doing it out of pity, which is strike number 1, Rory. You're on thin ice already. Oh, good call. Yes. A little bit of a red flag.
There are multiple.
Right? You know, someone who wants to be a journalist will grab every opportunity that they can find to get the story, get their name on a byline, make the front page. And this is the seeds of what we get from Mitchum saying she doesn't have it. He can see it in this moment that she's not willing to grab onto this and run with it right away because of some hang up she has about his motives in that moment, regardless of the opportunity it provides for her own advancement. And so that's a bit of a problem. We had a whole conversation too about how we felt about Mitchum's motives and whether or not they were pure in our second journalism episode that dropped a couple weeks ago. So go check that out as well for a little more on that.
Yeah. And I will say, I think she's personally very lucky that Mitchum didn't just like, you know, thank you next her right off the bat when she is just even hesitant about this internship. And I'll just equate it to something that that tracks for me. Like, I have a theater background. I've auditioned for plays. I've gone out for roles. You're not always going to get the lead role every single time, but maybe you're offered a secondary character or a tertiary character. You're not going to turn it down because, oh, I wanted to be the lead in this play. And if you're not going to let me be the lead, I don't even want to be a part of the production at all. They'd be like, all right, well, then you're not a part of this production and don't ever audition for us ever again with that sort of attitude. She's lucky that Mitchum didn't do that and immediately just dismiss her, because that's an abhorrent attitude to have. Like, this is a really great opportunity for you. Yeah, you're not going to start getting like award-winning bylines right off the bat, but we'll talk about it. Like, he even just gives her nods as if to say, like, hey, we could use some college reporters. We're always digging around at Yale for students who maybe want to freelance. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, elbow in your right side. And she's just like, can I get you some more coffee?
Yeah. He could have turned around in that moment and been like, hey, Paris, you want an internship? And she would have been like, yeah, because that's Paris. And that's why Paris ends up where she does later on. We see Paris's unceasing grit. She always puts in the work and goes the extra mile. I reference this a lot, but I love it so much. In season 7, when she's doing Operation Finish Line, and she has an entire list of things she wants to do before the end of the year to make sure that she squeezes every last ounce of opportunity and fun and worth out of her Yale degree, just like oil from a rag, she is determined to get everything out of this experience that she possibly can. Whereas Rory is always back on her heels. We see this in season 5 when she comes back to school and realizes that everybody else at the paper had these amazing summers and made professional strides, got experience for their resume, while she took off to Europe to pal around with her grandmother. Mm-hmm. And, travel is great. It's fun. It's an eye-opening experience unto itself. But in terms of Rory's purported goal to be a journalist, she rarely takes the initiative to make that happen for herself. She has the opportunity to, I use the word opportunity a lot in this episode, but she has the ability to go out and get stuff for herself that she almost never takes. And I think that's part of where a lot of the frustration about this character comes in from the fandom, because people are like, you don't like to admit it, but you have so much privilege and people would kill to be in your position. And yet you're so wrapped up in your own drama that you can't even see 5 feet in front of you to put yourself in a position to do what it is you say you want to do. Lorelai says to her when she tells her that she's going to drop out of Yale, like when Rory's telling Lorelai, Lorelai says, you've wanted to be a journalist since you were 3. Do you remember what you wanted to do when you were 3?
Oh, Lord. No.
I don't remember jack from when I was 3. This is insane.
I will say, when I was 3 years old, my peak excitement was the garbage man coming around to pick up the trash every single morning. So yeah, I was totally on par with what I wanted to do in life.
We need Freud to come unpack that, because yowza. For me, I think it was those little Fisher-Price cars. For some reason, I was obsessed with those. And now I have driving anxiety, so riddle me that.
But Freud, if you're listening, and we know that you are.
From beyond the grave.
Pick our brains.
Yeah. Yeah, the point being, there's this idea in the Gilmore household that Rory has wanted this thing forever, and therefore that means that she should just get it, and that she's doing everything she can to get it and to put herself in the running for, fancy bylines and jobs at the New York Times, when in reality, she just coasts by with ideas about how good of a writer she is. And that's where Mitchum's criticism really comes in, is he can see that, she is competent, she's smart. He said that he read some of her stuff and that he knows great. He's seen great. He's been around the greats since she was droopy drawers, literally. He's been doing this a long time. He has the cachet to be able to make statements like this. And he can tell that there is just something lacking in her innermost drive to succeed as a journalist. She thinks it's what she wants, but is it really? And that's something we've been trying to unpack in previous episodes as well. And I think he just has this sixth sense about what it takes. And she doesn't because she's naive.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think it even goes back to what we saw from her first few days at this internship and the sort of work that she was doing. And you have to understand what sort of internship you're walking into. Perhaps for Mitchum Huntzberger, I think it was, you're supposed to shadow me and you're supposed to be learning what I do and absorbing that and taking away those skill sets to then just put forth that same effort yourself. So if you see me asking someone to re-edit a piece that they thought was already finished, question why. If you're seeing me, dismiss articles that are potentially up for publication, ask why. But just look at what I'm doing, not just, again, can I get you coffee? Do I need to file this paper away in this drawer? She was very much behaving, I think, more like a secretary and an administrative person within this internship, when that's not the opportunity that Mitchum presented to you. And it's good to do those things to put forth like that additional effort, but that's not what you're there for. There's a person to pour coffee, I'm sure, if coffee needs to be brought into the meeting room or the break room or wherever it is. So I don't think she was asking the right questions and doing enough of the groundwork that she needed to be doing. And again, there's so much that we didn't see, but I would have loved scenes of maybe just Rory going around and saying like, hey, can I just, I know you're about ready to get this piece published and, send it over to editing to be reviewed. Can I actually take a look at it and read it if you don't mind? I'd love to just, edit it in a way where my edits won't be final, but maybe I can just take a quick peek, see what some of your writing strengths are. Talk to other people who are actually writing those articles and say, how did you come up with the idea for this? Where did your inspiration come from? Are there any sort of freelance opportunities again out there? Is there something that I can be writing on that no one else really wants to take on right now? But we don't see her asking, I think, the right questions early on in this internship. I think she was just a little bit too content, again, to take on that secretarial position and be like, send this up to editing. This needs to go to, this floor stat. Can I get you coffee? Do you need a napkin? That's not what you're there for. And Mitchum notices that. And I think that's why he realizes, I'm trying to give her this opportunity, but I can't spoon feed her everything. She needs to be asking the right questions for herself. And when we eventually get to that meeting, when he's talking about those freelance opportunities that could be had from universities like Yale, and there are college students who may want to take on bylines because no one else within the actual publication wants to write on it. One thing that stood out to me was that he very transparently glances at her at least 2 times that I noticed within that scene, as if to say hey, chime in. Hey, chime in.
Hey, raise your hand, volunteer.
Do you have something to say? And she's just mm-hmm. But nada. And I think that's why at the end of that scene, he makes the comments that he does, and we'll talk about those as well. But he was giving her every single opportunity, and she was just sitting there like a mute, just not doing anything. That had to have been noticed, and I think it's right that he did, and it's right that he draws the conclusions that he does from even those small little moments.
It's absolutely true. They were talking about finding someone to cover things happening in New York City and, where they were going to get the resources for that. And he suggests going to students at Yale. They'll jump at the chance for it. And I believe they're referencing going to check out Franz Ferdinand specifically. I'm like, Rory would be the perfect person for that job. She's just sitting there like she's not even mentally there with them and not jumping at the chance to be like, I'll go. New York City, music, headlines, bylines, count me in. And I think that was the third test. That was test number 3. Test number 2 was bring a pencil. You'll never know when you need a pencil. And she failed that one too. So here we are. 3 strikes, Rory. Your turn up at bat was a poor showing. And it just cemented his ideas about her. But I think you made another interesting comment that bears further exploration, because the thing about this is, like I said, Mitchum is not the editor of this paper. He heads the conglomerate that owns this paper. He is not the one who's going in and redlining people's articles. He's not making content suggestions that we can see. He's trying to give the leadership at this location the tools to streamline their processes, to find creative solutions to the problems they're having when it comes to circulation and budget and writing and all of these things. And it's good for Rory to view the business of the newspaper, but like I said, she's more interested in being a journalist, being out, getting the stories. And the other side of that, I think that's important to mention, is that it is not the CEO's job to coddle you. He is not there as her trainer. She just gets to sit in on what they're doing, you know? She only got this job because of Logan in the first place, but just because she has a more personal connection to the CEO doesn't mean he owes her anything different than he would give any other employee, including unvarnished criticism. You know, it's not his job to give specific performance reviews. He's not the one in charge of Rory specifically just because she's shadowing him. I think he only did that and gave her that feedback because she's Logan's girlfriend and he was the one who brought her in. And he wants to be honest with her that what he's seen hasn't been that impressive, you know? It's not his job to come in and say how good each individual writer is, because to make it this far in the newspaper business, it's assumed that you're at least baseline good. But there should have been probably someone else at the newspaper who was more in charge of her, who made the parameters and expectations clearer, who gave her assignments like that go beyond the development of those secretarial skills that made him say, yeah, you'd be a great assistant. And I also think it's maybe a little bit ridiculous that the only 2 options are journalist or assistant. Like, there's nothing else that exists in this business. But I just think it's important to remember that, you know, Mitchum's not coming in here and giving specific performance reviews to any other employees. And he's just trying to do Rory a favor. As he says, he's like, you know, just to let you know, I'm seeing something that concerns me here. And I don't think you have what it takes to make it in this business, because it's very tough and there's a lot of stress. And I haven't seen you jumping at the chance to get into all of this. You know, you're really sitting back way too much. You're just letting things happen to you. And you have a great set of skills, but maybe not all of the skills necessary to be a great journalist.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really important to also, as we're getting into what he actually said to her in that meeting, which we can go over, we've pretty much already said most of it, but we can, you know, read it verbatim if necessary. But I think the delivery was also really important here in terms of how he was hitting her over the head with this, so to say. And he wasn't coming down on her saying, like, you suck, you're a crappy journalist, your articles are horrible, you are never going to have what it takes, I don't even know why you've wasted my time at this internship, find another career and just GTFO, because this has just been a total abhorrent waste. He could have come down on her a lot crueler and a lot harsher than he did. And I actually think Mitchum was gracious in a way, which is really a surprising word to use for Mitchum Huntzberger. But I genuinely will give him credit here and say that he was. He was just like, listen, you don't got it. But he goes a step further and says, here's what I'm noticing to back up my rationale here. You know, I don't see you raising your hand. I don't see you chiming in. We just had other people chiming in on this meeting. Why didn't you speak up? And she says, well, I didn't think it was my place to do so. I'm just an intern. No, Rory, like, yes, you are an intern, but you're here to learn. You're not going to learn by sitting like sitting like a mouse in the corner, not doing anything. And Mitchum again gave you multiple nods as if to say, like, I want you to talk. I want you to pitch forth an idea. I want you to say something here. And so it was all of those realizations that led him to those comments. But again, he was very considerate, I think, in terms of how he was saying, like, I've given you this opportunity, but here's why I don't think that this is necessarily going to work out for you, because you're just not committed enough. I don't see a real motivation or a real passion. Why are you here? Is this really what you want? I'm not getting enough of that. I think you make a great point that like Paris would have been all over that, but that's, a whole different point to make there. But I think he was appropriate with what he was verbalizing to her in that moment. And Rory obviously did not take it well and then immediately started spiraling from it. But I think that's just perhaps even a red flag number 4, as if to say, like, Mitchum is just honestly giving you some, what I think is really wonderful constructive criticism. And instead of just coming back, and I would have loved to have seen Rory come back and just say, okay, well, you don't see me talking enough. You don't see me raising my hand enough. What can I be doing better? What should I be changing in terms of my day-to-day work effort? What should I be focusing on more? What should I be focusing on less? She didn't even ask any follow-up questions. She just immediately was like, Mitchum thinks I suck. I suck. So here we go, folks.
So I might as well become a felon.
Bodie boat.
My original plan for life didn't pan out, so now I'm just gonna turn to a life of crime, frankly. You make an excellent point there about how very differently this could have turned out for her if she had taken his criticism to heart in a less personal way. I think there's so much of her identity wrapped up in all of this, in being a great journalist and being great at everything she does and receiving unceasing praise, so that when she gets an iota of criticism, even if it's valid, about this thing that she holds so dear and so fundamentally to her self-conception, that she thinks he's attacking her instead of offering her something that she can use to progress, whether that be, a renewed sense of drive and passion for this thing, and maybe she does try harder, she asks questions, she refuses to give up, or an idea about like, hey, maybe I should be rethinking this, maybe I should come up with some other way to follow my passions, maybe I should be a writer of books, of fiction, nonfiction, whatever, on that side of things, instead of a journalist who works for a paper. I can find other ways to exercise my skills and interests that don't involve this particular environment. So he's offering her these pieces of information that she can use, and instead of doing that, she gets defensive and has a downward spiral and a mentee B. So it's not great. But yeah, it would have been great to see her asking questions like that and recommitting and proving him wrong immediately. But instead, like, obviously this is a TV show, we have to do it for the drama, and so we don't get that rational reaction from her. We get this massive overcorrection instead. And we're living for the juice, but it also causes Rory to do a lot of things that are out of character, which bothers a lot of people. And some of this does continue on into the later seasons. She does sort of rebound eventually and comes back stronger than ever. She tries to prove Mitchum wrong. She still holds a grudge against him for saying all of these things. But come the revival, we see that he was right about her. He had her clocked from basically day one. But yeah.
And I think the writing was on the wall for her there too with that. Like, Mitchum definitely saw it. But I just even think back to season 1 when she is sitting in Charleston's office and he says, what do you want to be? What are your pursuits? What are your ambitions? And we all know, her response, and we've talked about this before. But she says, I want to make sure that I see something. And to me, it's just like, I thought about that a lot in the lead up to this. It's like, you didn't say, like, I want to write about what I see. You just said, I want to see things. Or not that I want to become a first class writer like Christian Amanpour or like these other writers that I perhaps idolize or, look up to. Your response was just, I just want to make sure that I see something. But there was no indication there of like, I want to write, I want to be successful in that regard. And so it just made me think like, Rory's always been an avid reader. That much is clear to us. She has a passion for literature and for books. She obviously has a very big interest in wanting to travel. She tells Richard, I want to go to Fez. He writes her multiple checks for that. I think Rory is a young girl, and as we see her progress into her years, like into her early 20s, it's like, yes, you love literature. Yes, you love travel. I think you want to maybe combine those two things and make sure that you can get enough of that. But that doesn't mean that journalism is your end game. Because again, I would have like in my mind, Charleston, the response there should have been, I want to write about what I see, not just see things, but write about it and commentate on it as well, and use it to open eyes to the world as to what could be wrong in other societies or religions or cultures. It was just very much about, I want to just make sure that like I get enough fulfillment out of my life, but not putting anything forth to then let's talk about what I've seen or what I've witnessed, which is very transparent to me in thinking about this as well, and why Mitchum was probably just like, you're not motivated to want to put any of this out there. You just want to have it for you.
That's a really fitting callback. She says, I want to be Christiane Amanpour. She doesn't say, I want to do what Christiane Amanpour does. I want to get the story on the ground. I want to speak to the locals and tell their stories. I want to expose corruption from the inside. I want to break a big story that changes people's lives. None of that ever comes through. It's just, I want to look a certain way. I think it's a little more about perception and prestige than it is about passion. And I think that's where Rory's journalistic career doesn't work for her, because there are so many things within it that she doesn't fully understand or embrace in the way that she needs to. And it results in her struggles later where she can't stitch together enough work to make this happen for herself. And even having opportunities presented to her, like the meeting with Condé Nast and the interview with Sandy, says she doesn't seem to learn her lesson from either of those things about like, hey, maybe I should go in with pitches ready and maybe I should have some actual ideas. There's just so much that she leaves on the table. And that's what Mitchum is saying is the problem. She's not grabbing the bull by the horns. She's not picking up what other people are laying down. She's not going after anything. She's just trying to be good and trying to be liked. And we see it in other areas of her life, even in her relationship with Dean, when they break up and she goes to his window and she says, I'm pretty sure your mom hates me now. And Dean comes back at her and says, well, too bad, Rory. Someone doesn't like you for once. And I think a lot of this is about being liked, being respected, being in a position of glory and power that is appealing to her, as opposed to the heart of journalism, which is exposing maybe some of the darker parts of society so that people are aware of what's truly happening in the world. And she only seems to be concerned with herself. Her world is herself and her mom and her boyfriend and maybe her grandparents, and that's why she's so self-centered and not looking out at the world enough. She says she wants to see something, but then she just doesn't even bother to.
Yeah, I think there was definitely a lot of self-absorption there. And I think you made an excellent point kind of highlighting that. But journalism, like you said, is supposed to be about exposing some of those harder truths. It's not just about, oh, I wrote this really wonderful, shiny piece, put it on the back of a diner menu.
Wrapped in plastic.
It's more than that. You're supposed to almost be doing service to a greater good with what you're writing, because you're trying to like better the world when you see things within like you said, a society or a culture that are really wrong and detrimental and that could be corrected if more people knew about it or read about it. That's your job, to expose those things. And I think for Rory, it was never about the exposure of what is wrong within those societies for the betterment of them, but just, how is this going to make me look at the end of the day? Am I going to be famous? Is my name going to be in like shiny red byline lights? Like, and it just makes me think like you're really doing journalism for, or pursuing it for the wrong reason, if that's what you're going for as well. So just add it to the list of reasons why, like, not only do you not have maybe the gravitas to do that, you probably shouldn't, because your motivations behind it are really warped and twisted.
Yeah, if you want to see your name splash somewhere, just look to the Rory Gilmore Astronomy Building.
Yep.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
All right, let's back it up again, because you said maybe we could read this out. And I think we should actually read out what he says to her and go through this sort of bit by bit, because it is really important. I think when we first watched this show, we are inclined to sympathize with Rory. You know, she is our main character. There's a lot of history between us and her, and we want to see her succeed. We've been rooting for her since day one to get into an Ivy League and to do big things in her life. So many of us look up to her as study spo, and a lot of people try to get into Ivy Leagues because of her. It's kind of a thing. So to see her so down on her luck, and to see someone being critical of her for not quite the first time in the show, but like, there aren't that many instances of big picture criticism that she receives or issues she has to overcome like this. And that's why I think this moment hits so hard, because it's the first of more of a trend of that happening to her. Bad things happening, her not getting her way, and having to deal with the real world outside of Stars Hollow and outside of her insular bubble of people who hold her up as an angel on a pedestal. And Mitchum is the kind of person who will give you his unvarnished feelings and thoughts without much thought of how that will make you feel. He doesn't give a crap how you feel, because the truth is more important than that. And I think maybe that's an interesting kind of side to journalism as well, is a lot of journalists have to be willing to talk about hard truths, which is something Rory learns about the ballerina in Dijerk, right? We've had that conversation before about sometimes you're going to have to say bad things, mean things, negative things. You're going to have to make people look bad and feel bad. And that's just part of what this whole endeavor is, okay? And then when that's turned on her, it's a problem. So I think we need to look at Mitchum's words more objectively and take Rory's feelings about all of this and her sense of identity out of it, and just look at what he says. And I think it's way less harmful and hurtful than, you know, on a first watch, or even, you know, there are still some people in the fandom who probably feel like Mitchum is a jackass and he shouldn't have said these things. They were cruel. They were uncalled for. But I don't think so. And so I want to kind of go through this whole thing because I think it's important. I've worked with a lot of young people over the years, interns, new hires. I've got a pretty good gut sense for people's strengths and weaknesses, whether they have that certain something to make it in journalism. It's a tough business, a lot of stress. And I have to tell you, you don't got it. Now, guts can be wrong. Mine has been wrong before, but not often. I don't really think that you have the drive to put yourself out there, to be honest, to get a story, to dig. I mean, just now in this meeting, I encouraged everyone to say what they wanted. You said nothing. The thing is, in the real world, it's not always good enough to just do what's asked of you. I'm not saying you're not competent. You're smart. You're terrific at anticipating needs. Actually, you'd make a great assistant. I'm sorry, it's not my pleasure. Sorry, it's not my pleasure to disappoint someone like you, especially you, what with the extenuating circumstances. But it's healthy. I don't know any other way. I don't BS. listen, I know this is rough, but I may have just done you a big favor. And I think there's nothing in there that is mean. There's nothing in there that's untrue or underhanded in any way. He's trying to be very gentle with her, but he's not going to let the fact that this is his son's girlfriend color his perceptions of her professional capabilities. And I think you're right. He was quite gentle with her. He was diplomatic. He just said what he thought and he backed it up. Like you said, he said he's seen a lot of new hires, a lot of interns. He's been around long enough to have seen all of this in action. And compared to what he's used to and who he's interacted with in the past, Rory is just not up to snuff.
Yeah, I agree. And he really did her a favor. Again, he could have just kept her on the pedestal that this fandom has become so used to seeing Rory on, that Amy and Dan have put her on, that all of us who are viewers have put her on at one point or another, ourselves included. But we need to knock her down off of that pedestal sometimes, just like Mitchum did. And again, not in an assholey sort of way, but just as if to say, like, hey, you are not holier than thou. You are not the ice cream queen of the journalistic world. Like, you have a long way to go if you want to succeed. And I don't even think that Mitchum was saying, he didn't even say, like, you'll never have it. It's just, from what I am seeing, I don't think you've got it right now. And it wasn't a nail in the coffin. I think it was just his way of saying, like, you can do better. You just need to have some, like, just more of a drive. You need to have more of a self-motivation. You need to be more of a go-getter. You need to be asking better questions, broaching these internships and these career opportunities in a different way, seizing the bull by the horns, like you said before, as opposed to just sitting back and just quietly observing, because and then expecting opportunities to be handed to you, because that's not how this business works. And you are never going to get to where you want to be if that's just what you expect. So it's not that you can never get there. It's just, unless you start making some drastic changes, I don't think you have it right now. And I think that was also a really important differentiation to make in terms of what he is saying, where I'm not killing your career path here and saying, like, I'll never give you a reference, I'll make sure you never work within this field ever again. It's just, you've got a lot of work to do to get yourself to where you want to be.
It's true. The way he phrases it is that, like, it implies you have to have it, that it cannot be developed or learned. And maybe that's where a lot of the criticism of this character comes from, is it's too black and white and it doesn't leave a lot of room for nuance. It just puts her down instead of offering her suggestions or options. But other than that, yeah, I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. He's not wrong about it. It stings, but sometimes we have to hear things that are not flattering, that make us feel bad. But then it's our responsibility to decide what to do with those. And a mature person takes that constructive criticism and they learn from it and they grow from it. They ask for it, they seek it out, because they know that's the only way to get better. And Rory thinks she could do that. You know, she's like, oh, I'm excited to hear anything you have to say. And it's like, no, you're not. You're not ready to receive this in the way you're trying to portray. And that is a mark of maturity. It truly is. And Mitchum can spot it because, again, he is an intelligent, experienced person who was born and bred for this. So I wish she had asked, as you said earlier, just ask more specific questions. Ask for direction. Ask for another shot. And that leads me to something that sort of came into my mind while preparing for this episode that hadn't really occurred to me through previous rewatches, which is when she decides to go back to Yale, she pesters Stuart Waltz for first for a reference and then for a job. And I'm a little shocked that Waltz didn't look at her and just be like, why do you think I would do that for you when, like, you just disappeared. You know, from all accounts, Mitchum gave Rory this feedback. She went and stole a boat and she never came back. Was her internship over? Did she ever return to the Stamford Eagle? Because that after that, until she decided to go get this job, you know, what does it say about her commitment and dedication and professionalism that after that it was just over? She just left, you know? And why would the editor say so many nice things and just pass it off as, oh, it's a shame you couldn't get along with Herr Huntzberger, but it's not the first time it's happened. No, Rory was being an unprofessional little brat here. Don't let her get away with this. And on top of that, then she pesters him even further for this thing that he says is impossible, which is not tenacity, it's entitlement. I think we covered that in our previous journalism episodes, and it doesn't show that she's learned anything. She's just doing it to prove Mitchum wrong because she thinks he's a jerk who slighted her, and he has no idea how great she is, and if she could just, you know, get in the door again, she could show everybody what she's got. And then we literally never see that storyline pan out for her ever again.
All of that louder for the people in the back, please.
Okay, let me rewind the tape and adjust the volume. Listen to it backward like Pink Floyd.
No, but I mean, you make an excellent point, especially about Stuart. If I was him, I'd be like, you dipped out. Where did you go? And now you're coming back in here, not even saying, can I get my internship back? But it's just like, a job, please. When there are none to be had.
Jobs, please. Like
need monies.
Mona Lisa from Parks and Rec. Jenny Slate is always a good reference.
Yes, indeed. But like, yeah, like what you said, like holy entitlement. Where are you coming from? If I was in any sort of employer position like that, like it would be so hard for me to just not laugh someone out of the building and be like, are you for real right now? Like what is this sense of privilege and entitlement, and where is this coming from? And that's a loaded question that can be answered within, Gilmore family history. Whole other topic. Oh yeah, I shudder. But she can't even take no for an answer at that point, when it's just like, well, why are you telling me no? I didn't do anything wrong. I had my feelings hurt, but like I rebounded and I'm ready now. It's just like, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
And yet she gets it because she's Rory Gilmore. It's so frustrating sometimes. But you brought up Lorelai. Let's go back to her because she has a very strong reaction that, shall we say, grinds my gears. And I just find it so interesting because Lorelai believes in working hard and not just expecting things. And yet that's exactly how her daughter behaves. And nobody seems to put two and two together that there's a disconnect here. That Rory, it's not that she doesn't work hard, but her work ethic is very rudimentary. It comes down to doing what she has to do to get what she thinks she wants, which, as is pointed out to her multiple times over the series, is not enough in the real world. You know, we start out with hammers and veils when Paris freaks her out by reminding her, or teaching her in the first place, that, hey, everybody who applies to Harvard has good grades. It's the extracurriculars and the other stuff that separates you from the crowd and puts you over the top, because you're going to be going up against thousands of other people with perfect GPAs. You have to do more than the bare minimum to get anywhere in life. And Lorelai just sees this good kid who's well behaved, who wants to spend her time reading and learning and treats people well. And she's like, good job, Rory. You're the best. You're so perfect. You deserve everything because you're just such a great person. And she doesn't seem to notice that element about Rory where she does push her sometimes, which I will give Lorelai credit for. She pushes her to go along with Paris's scheme to make her vice president, and she pushes her to open the door at their first party at college. She encourages Rory to gather life experiences and to participate and to do more than just sit in a corner with a book. But anytime someone comes at Rory and does anything like this, she doesn't even conceive of the possibility that it's Rory's own work ethic that's the problem. And, she immediately goes to blame and deflection to Mitchum. She says, big, fancy, arrogant creep handing down these all-knowing proclamations. I mean, how the hell does he know if you have it or not? Has he seen your writing? Has he talked to you? I mean, really talked to you? Has he talked to any of your teachers? Has he talked to anyone who knows how much it you have? No. He spent exactly 2 weeks with you, ordering you around, sending you on coffee runs, playing the big shot. Yeah, he is the big shot, Lorelai. And calling him all of these names and making these assumptions about someone you haven't even met and have only heard hearsay about is not maybe the way to go about supporting your daughter in this moment. She says, oop, I skipped back down. Scroll back up. She says that he's not God. He's just a guy with a good parking space. And this is just one man's opinion. He didn't invent journalism. She's right about that. He is just one person. Maybe somebody else has a different take on her. But, I don't know that any other person at this point in her life, what if she did meet Seymour Hersh and he was just like, you're sweet, but you're unremarkable. There are, hundreds, if not thousands of other kids out there studying journalism right now who are just like you, except they're going to go out and grab what they want, and you're just sort of like, I'm just gonna wait for somebody to take me somewhere and give me something.
Yeah, and you make an excellent point. Mitchum didn't have to do all of that legwork. That wasn't his job. Rory was not applying for a position right now where I need your credentials. And even if he did, those are something that you put on a resume as if to say, why do you deserve this position? But it wasn't going to be up to Mitchum to start calling up Rory's professors and be like, how is she in class? Do you think she writes well? Is she responsive? Does she raise her hand a lot? Can you send me some of her samples? I just really want to get to know who she is a little bit better. No, that would be a job for someone like Harry or for another somebody in management position who's upper level within this paper to say hey, let's take a deeper look at you here to see should we consider keeping you on board long term? Again, like what you said before, he's just there to get the paper up to speed. And so I think he's doing even Rory a courtesy to give her that time of day and those moments to say hey, let me just give you some feedback, which she wasn't even entitled to be receiving from him with where he was as, again, head honcho, and you're just an intern here who has this opportunity but is not even a paid employee who is worthy or merits any sort of feedback right now. So again, he just went above and beyond, I think, to give her that, and she needed to take it with a grain of salt. As hard of a pill as it is to swallow it, and then just try and move on from it. But Lorelai too needed to be a much better mom in that moment and say okay, well, let's talk about this. What did you do on your day to day at this internship? Did you ask for opportunities to write something? Tell me about how you spent your time, what your hours were like. And if she had said oh, I was just making coffee and filing papers and doing that, I think Lorelai would have had maybe a different response to say well, why didn't you do more? Maybe then Mitchum would have seen something more in you. And instead of asking those questions, Lorelai just, again, like you said, defaulted to how dare he crap on my child like that and dismiss her capabilities when I know it's there? Who is he? And it's like, well, again, like what you said, he's the boss. So he's noticing these things and he's just putting forth what he is seeing, and he has the right to do so. And we'll talk about it as well, because I definitely want to, broach a little bit on their response as well. But Lorelai basically does the same thing eventually down the line that we see Richard end up doing.
Exactly. She just jumps to, it must be his problem because my perfect angel child could not possibly have done anything wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
And you make such a good point. She didn't even ask, like, so, what went wrong? What do you think is the problem here? Yeah, ask about what she was doing and get to the bottom of it, instead of just jumping to the conclusion that somebody else is the jerk in the situation and that the criticism could not possibly have been legitimate and valid and valuable to Rory. To go off on Mitchum like this just further reinforces Rory's sense of entitlement and grandiosity. I mean, she's in a really low moment here, so she doesn't feel it, and obviously it gets to her so deeply that she feels like she needs a break from Yale after this. But down the line, it really does, like, it's so ingrained in her that I'm so great, I should just get these things. It happens with the rest in fellowship, it happens with all the stuff in the revival, and it's partly due to Lorelai not asking more questions and not opening up Rory's mind to the possibility that there's more to do, that there's questions to be asked about all of this, that just being smart and sweet and competent isn't always enough to rise you through the ranks, to get you up the ladder that you need to climb. And that goes to the whole idea of Rory graduating from Yale. And obviously it's a very prestigious institution. She's worked on the paper. She has great credentials on paper. Sorry, there's a fruit fly. I'm not just swatting away demons.
I have been doing that for the first 45 minutes. I've been trying to be really subtle about it, but like I've had one too, and I'm just like, no.
Yeah, it's that time of year. Anyway, where was I? She graduates with this idea that, okay, that time it almost went in my mouth. This is not cool. She graduates with this idea that she's going to start out at the New York Times, as if there's no other way to achieve that goal, that there isn't a professional ladder that needs to be climbed before you can make it to the pinnacle of journalism in America, or at least in her mind, that's what it was at that time. And just this delusional belief that it's where she belongs immediately at the age of 22, with no life experience and no work experience except for one internship that she bombed. Having good grades at Yale is not enough to catapult her to the top. I mean, we're going to have a conversation about this in the future, about how basically going to an Ivy League is a cheat code for life, and how it creates this perception of competency and intelligence that acts as a stand-in for actual experience and other skills, that people do look at you differently when you're coming from an Ivy. But that also isn't a given necessarily, and it's maybe not even across the board from within an Ivy League in terms of like wealthy versus poor students. What are the outcomes like for students like Rory, who come from, well, once again, just a whole other conversation, but Rory thinking she comes from a low income background and that she doesn't have the privilege of wealth the way some people do, which is fallacious in many ways. But she just leaps ahead in her mind to these things that she thinks she deserves by virtue of being the best in Stars Hollow, the best in Chilton, and then, pretty good at Yale. When there's an entire country, if not, maybe some foreign students applying to things like the Reston Fellowship, and people from Europe maybe wanting to come to the United States to work in journalism over here in North America. And just this idea that she alone is unique and special like a snowflake and should have everything that she's ever dreamed of at the age of 22. I just
want to say this real quick, and as a response to that, when Mitchum says, "You don't got it," and her response, the word choice here is so telling to me. I thought I was doing okay.
So telling.
You thought you were doing okay?
Just okay.
Not great, not spectacular, not hitting a home run. Like, I don't know if there was an unknown internal realization there that maybe you were just even not up to par at that point in time. But yeah, it speaks volumes to me that she just doesn't even come back and say, like, hang on, I think I've been doing really great here, and let me outline the reasons for you as to why I think I've just been doing really wonderful in this position. It's just like, well, I thought I was doing okay. Yeah. On what planet do you think that okay or average, even within an internship for a real life publication, is going to measure up? I think that was just enough said.
Yeah, it could just be shock in the moment and her not really thinking through what she's going to say, but it seems like she couldn't even explain her own value proposition at that moment and be like, well, I've done X, Y, and Z, and, you know, what about those things? She can't even seemingly come up with anything. It could just be as simple as, I'm shocked at what I'm hearing and don't know how to process this, but it just goes to show that to her, acing the bare minimum is what she's used to and what she's programmed for. And so when it doesn't happen for her, she just throws her hands up like, oh, well, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, might as well just, quit Yale, reconsider any other life path because I'm never going to be a journalist. I guess I'll just drop out of school and, maybe go, I don't know, consider doing something as like, as like teaching.
Ew.
And I say, like teaching. But again, I've said it before. I think that Charleston was right when he said, maybe consider that as oppression. I think Rory would have really been wonderful at that. But I think like at that point, anything other than journalism, she was just going to see as beneath her, which is a problem in and of itself.
It's wild because she's so willing to throw in the towel so soon after getting one piece of criticism and one thing that shocks her sense of purpose. I think it speaks to her commitment to this field. I think if she truly was like, no, screw you, Mitchum. Like, this is what I love. This is what I'm going to do with my life. Whether you think I've got it or not. She's just so willing to be like, well, I guess that's it for me. Just might as well pack it up and go do something else. And that speaks volumes to me about her capabilities long term. And yeah, we've said it before. She would be better served doing something else. I have said it and will continue to say it. I would love to see her teach at Chilton. I think she'd be such a great English teacher and such a great faculty advisor on the Franklin. It just is, that to me is the perfect full circle moment.
Yeah.
And I really need to see it.
Seeing her like mentor students, getting them ready for their own Ivy League 4-year path, like chef's kiss.
Exactly. And instead we just got millennial hate, 10 to 15 minutes of a musical we didn't need. The Wookiee, Paul. I feel cheated out of such a beautiful storyline that we could have had in this revival. Anyway, let's move on to Richard and Emily. You were starting to move there earlier, but there's a little bit more to go on Lorelai.
No, but I think it's definitely, we need to touch on their reaction to this news as well. Which, first off, they don't even want to believe it. They're like, the Huntzbergers would never do something like that to Rory. And it starts even with Shira's comment about, you're not good enough to marry into the Huntzberger clan. You're never going to be good enough for Logan. And then Mitchum's follow-up and separate comment about, like, you don't got it. Why do you think Emily and Richard were so naive to or ready to just not acknowledge the fact that your granddaughter's telling the truth? These people were like they just treated her like garbage, and they said these really nasty things to her. Why do you think there was that disconnect between believing what not even Rory, but also what Lorelai is saying, but just standing by like the Huntzbergers could never do something like that?
I feel like there are a couple components to it. The first is obviously that they, like Lorelai, very much view Rory as nearly infallible. They love her to pieces. They know how smart she is, how compassionate, how good of a writer. Richard has read a bunch of her articles that she's written in the past and just sees genius there, which, there's a bias because he's like, I think it's when she's, nearer the top of her class or whatever, he's like, well, she's my granddaughter. I should be able to take some of the credit for how smart she is, basically. So there's that idea of legacy and her living up to their standards and being on their level of intelligence and culture and class and all of that. So there's that portion of it. And then there's the portion where they don't necessarily trust Lorelai because they know about how she feels about the world of privilege that Mitchum exists in and has ideas about what that might pass on to Rory. And seriously, stop. They know that she tends to exaggerate and over dramatize her reactions to these things because of her own feelings. And they don't want Rory to always be held back from things because of Lorelai's, knee-jerk reactions to issues like this. I think they are also in denial a little bit about the possibility that the Huntzbergers could look down on the Gilmores so much because they exist in the same circles, and they should know how much fake niceties go on in their circles because they participated in it themselves behind closed doors. They should know that everybody is shit talking everybody, and it only makes sense that someone somewhere is looking down on them or talking about them around the dinner table and about their goings on, gossiping about all of that. But they don't like to believe it. They don't want to believe that these supposed friends could consider their granddaughter unworthy of marrying into their family. So there's just pure denial at play. And I think those are the 3 points where I was like, yeah, that they just don't want to believe anything about the dinner. They don't want to believe that Rory could receive that kind of criticism from Mitchum because they believe in her. They have seen her capabilities, and none of them are in journalism, so they don't know what it is or what it takes. And so they're just going off of pure love and support and compassion for their granddaughter, who is going through this early existential crisis when she comes crying to them about her life being in turmoil. And they want to do everything they can for her. They want to believe that she's got what it takes to go the distance. And anything to that, or to disprove that, is just cognitively dissonant to them. They just, it's not computing in their brains that this is even possible.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And then we eventually get to the moments of realization, which Emily doesn't have. I mean, she obviously just finds out from Richard, like, hey, everything that Lorelai told us was true. Mitchum and Shira actually did tear her apart. But I want to talk about that interaction in the bathroom between Mitchum and Richard, because I think that was just so juicy, and it was written so well. It was acted so well. But I think what really stood out to me first off was how dismissive Mitchum was of the criticism that he had given Rory, as if to say, like, listen, she's not the first person that I've told this to. And she probably was not. Mitchum has probably had numerous conversations like this with employees over the years. And I think that's what he was trying to appropriately, in my mind, convey to Richard, where it's like, this is not a dig on you. This is not a dig on your family. I'm not insulting you or your cow here. I'm just trying to tell you that, like, I saw some things with your daughter's work ethic while she was at the paper as an intern that led me to believe that potentially she does not have what it takes to succeed in this business. And Richard knee-jerks reacts as if to say, like, you did just insult me. You did just insult my cow. Dishonor on everybody. Dishonor on my family. And how dare you? And he has the exact same response that Lorelai did when both of them needed to just ask better questions, as if to say, Mitchum, I've known you for years. You're just a very trusted and knowledgeable and successful businessman in your field in the same way that I am in the insurance biz. What are you noticing? Like, what could she have done better? And again, it was not even a conversation like for the bathroom at that point in time. I think he makes an excellent, like, can we do this on a phone call? Like, this probably should have been done elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm a little exposed here. Can we do this later?
Wow, thank you for putting that thought into my mind, which had never, yep.
At least they were just washing their hands. It was fine, but...
I'm going to take that image out of my head.
Ooh, mental image be gone.
Yeah.
In the words of April.
But I think Mitchum even had enough respect for Richard as a friend and colleague, and just, again, here's another businessman that I respect for how successful he is within his own field, where if Richard had called Mitchum up and had said, like, hey, can we just talk about this? Like, what did go wrong here? What did you notice? I think Mitchum would have given him the time of day in a couple of minutes, as like to say, like, hey, like, you know, Richard, like we said when we were talking in the bathroom, like, if you bring somebody in and you notice that they don't have it, what do you do with that person? That's exactly what I did with Rory. And so Richard's response there needed to just be a little bit more reserved. And I can understand, like, that's my granddaughter. You want to protect the family, uphold the family name, you know, just, you don't think that Rory is capable of ever doing anything wrong. But by not asking those questions and just thinking, like, these people are jerks, she's got it, how dare you, you're never doing Rory any favors in that regard moving forward in terms of her future, if she's never going to course correct and learn, because her family also has her back, as if to say, like, yeah, they're just jerks. You're fine. You're perfect. Keep going. You don't need them.
Yeah. Think about it this way. If Mitchum took every employee of every paper's emotions to heart about what he thought and what he had to say, he would implode. No one is capable of that much empathy, you know? At some point, you have to divorce yourself from the personal feelings of your employees, and you have to do what's best for the whole, right? You can't always, like, I'm not saying be a jerk and be unempathetic, but there is a line where it's like, you can't just coddle people who aren't living up to expectations just because you're like, oh, I feel so bad for you. I'm so sorry. Let me, like, wrap you in a blankie and calm you down and tell you everything's going to be okay, because he can't do that. That's not his role here. You know, his job is to run the business efficiently and to make sure everything is happening as it should. And so what he says to Richard is, I did what I do with everyone. I called it like I saw it. I was honest with her. I don't pussyfoot. You know that. And if she's got what it takes, she'll bounce back. No one's ever criticized you, reprimanded you, critiqued you. I find that hard to believe. She was in over her head. She lacked maturity. And Richard is just throwing stuff back at him like, you crushed her and she's not even 21. Like, it's just, once again, deflecting all of it back onto Mitchum. Like, you're the problem here, when no, Mitchum is just doing what he does. He has to deal with stuff like this all the time where he has to give a lot of criticism, and he's become inured to it. Like, it doesn't affect him that much. And so he's probably moved on and not even thinking about this because it's so routine for him. And yet Rory is here feeling absolutely demolished by this experience. But he can't always take that into consideration. Like, oh man, I really hurt that person's feelings today. I should go home and ruminate on that for a while. It's just, that's not how business works. It's not how capitalism operates. We don't have to like it, but it's true.
Yeah, and he even says, like, what I told her was healthy. It's what she needed to hear. And it was. And he did it in the most respectful manner that I think he could have at that point in time. He didn't just obliterate her and crush her dreams and tear her down as a human being. I think he was the most compassionate and professional that he could have been at that moment in time. And even just trying to then verbalize that to Richard as if to say, like, listen, I formulated my thoughts to her in the best way that I could at that point in time. Haven't you ever done the same? Richard was so unwilling to hear any of it. And I get that that's the Gilmore MO when it comes to Rory. But again, you're not doing your granddaughter any favors. And then for Richard to turn around and storm right out to Emily and say, like, these people are D-bags, everything that we know is actually true.
I ought to punch him.
Yeah, spurred a great scene from Emily and Shira, which is like
iconic,
amazing in terms of like that encounter. But again, at the end of the day, with circling back to Rory and trying to do what's best for your granddaughter, it's never going to do her any sort of regards in terms of, hey, maybe consider that what was said to you had some merit and had some truth to it. And let's talk about maybe opportunities that we can help you out in terms of pursuing what other internships might be out there for you. Maybe Richard's like, I can make some calls to some of my colleagues and say, you know, do you have any opportunities? Do you know of anything? Let's hit the ground running again and see how maybe you can do better next time. There was just none of that. It was just, how dare you insult my granddaughter in this way? She's perfect. And I hate you.
Yeah. It's another case of the Gilmores refusing to take accountability for any of their actions. You know, what Mitchum said wasn't particularly nice, but it wasn't wrong either factually or morally. All he did was tell an employee what he honestly thought of their career path. And so therefore it's not really satisfying to watch Richard say, you know, you said one thing to my granddaughter and therefore it's entirely your fault that she dropped out of Yale and gave up on her dream. You broke that girl, because that's not remotely justified. It comes off as kind of pathetic in a way, that he has to get that emotional about what is legitimate criticism. And, you know, it's not Mitchum's fault that Rory dropped out of Yale and gave up on her dream, quote unquote. That's Rory's fault. It's Rory's inability to receive any feedback whatsoever, apparently, you know. Just even I'm thinking to Incredible Sinking Lorelai's when she goes into the professor, like her game theory professor's office hours, expecting to hear, good job, Gilmore, you got an A. And then he's like, yeah, I'm noticing some red flags about the structure of this paper, and it seems like you pulled information and research from another class to pad this one, which leads me to believe you're probably trying to do too much. Maybe 5 courses is too much for you to take. I don't care what your grandfather did when he was here. Maybe you just work slower. And she's like, I don't work slower. And then she, again, falls apart at the idea that she has to drop a class. My God, I dropped at least 2 classes when I was in university because, yeah, taking 5 courses is kind of psychotic. I don't know why we do it to ourselves sometimes. But, just this idea that it's Mitchum's fault instead of Rory's for expecting things to always be gold stars. And then anytime that doesn't happen, just going off the rails entirely. It's a pattern with her that nobody seems to recognize. And so in that way, Mitchum coming in and shaking this up was actually a really good thing for Rory. I mean, the ultimate impact of it is hard to say because by the revival, we see that she really hasn't taken it to heart still. But he's the only one who seems to have any clear vision about Rory or her capabilities in any way, shape, or form. And, I was watching I Am Kayak Hear Me Roar earlier, and I was just like, man, I really like Mitchum. I went from being like, this guy's a jerk, to being like, yes, get her. And just, really appreciating him as a force in this show, both for Rory and for Logan. And Logan's not entirely wrong about him being a bit of a bully, and he has his moments of manipulation, as happens in I Am Kayak, thinking that he and Rory can puppet Logan to success, I guess. But I think for the most part, his intentions are good there. He wants his son to succeed. He wants the Huntzberger legacy to live on. He wants to help direct his son. I don't know that he wants to control every aspect of his life. And, I don't think we have to jump to it being that nefarious. I think he wants the best for Logan. I think, too, the scene in the elevator in Partings when Rory is peeved that he's set all these meetings and whatnot on Logan's graduation day, the day before he leaves for London, cutting into her time with him. And he's like, I just want him to get away from those dopes, Colin and Finn. I want him to go off to London. I want him to get his life together and start being an adult in the world who contributes and who works hard. I want to see him succeed. What part of this don't you agree with? And I think that's a good thing. Again, it kind of comes off as harsh and unfair. And there is maybe a touch of narcissism, a touch of manipulation in there. But on the scale of all of Gilmore Girls, I think he's actually not that bad. I don't think he's as bad as Emily or Richard, even. On the sliding scale of narcissism, he's maybe closer to the middle. There's some of it there that comes along with his station in life and his own ego. But overall, I found myself on my more recent watches being like, you go, Mitchum. I love you. There's something refreshing about this character that helps move things in the right direction for some of our characters that really needed it. And yeah, I'm really excited to meet Greg Henry real soon and just be like, I'm one of the people who actually likes your character.
We stand Mitchum Huntzberger.
Yeah, I never thought I would have said it, but I kind of do.
Yeah.
The more I watch it, the more I'm like, no, he was right about everything. He must be some sort of oracle. I don't actually hate him. I don't think I would want him to be my dad, but
yeah, and I think just really quickly bouncing off of what you said, when Logan makes the comments that he makes about he's wrong, he's just a bully, he doesn't know what he's saying, I'm gonna go talk to him. I think Logan is having that reaction because that's always what Mitchum has done to him as a father, in terms of just sandbagging him, as if to say your accomplishments are never enough, your efforts are never enough. And so that's just what he's doing to you, Rory. But don't take it personally, because he's done it to me my entire life. But there's a difference there between a father just trying to speak to his son and recognize his shortcomings and maybe motivate him to do better as a father-son dynamic versus an employer and an intern dynamic. And I think Logan was confusing the two in that moment as well, as if to say, like, he's just done this to me all the time. That's just what he's doing to you. But it's a very different relationship there.
Excellent point. Yeah. All very true. Let's start wrapping this up and giving a few final thoughts. I suppose I'll go first and then I'll give you some of the last words. But yeah, I think she had a real opportunity with this internship to prove herself and to get something impressive on her resume, to leave an impression on this paper and on Mitchum Huntzberger and on journalism as a whole. And she fumbled it. And it's hard to watch the fallout at times. One of the things that like really gets me about all of it too is that like she still holds a grudge against Mitchum, and you know, she doesn't stop to think that, hey, journalism has a ton of criticism baked right in. It's very competitive, it's high stress, it's emotionally difficult. You know, she learned this with the ballerina and didn't carry that lesson with her. And it's not Mitchum's place to like care so much about her personal sense of self and her dreams for her life. It's his job to make sure his papers are successful. And so it bugs me when he actually does sort of reappraise her, and he gives an interview to the Wall Street Journal, I think it is, and says, you know, Rory Gilmore, I gave her an internship at one of my papers in Stanford, and now she's the editor of the Yale Daily News. And Rory just can't take that for what it is. And she has to go and call Kimberly Wells and say, I'm calling to request a correction. And just, you know, there's nothing factually incorrect about it. But she's like, the impression he left that he gave me my start, he did not give me my start. Yes, he did. Okay. Like, just because he worked on your school papers doesn't mean he didn't give you your start. And he's depicting me as one of the feathers in his cap. I am not one of his feathers. I mean, is that so bad? Is that so wrong for him to praise you publicly and to put your name out there in such a positive way? Why are you holding on to this like he's slighted you again, when actually he's saying very complimentary things in a very public forum that could actually get you some positive attention from other outlets? This is wild that you can't even see past your own vendetta to appreciate what he's just done for you. And so you try to call this publication and be like, I need to correct the impression that Mitchum is responsible for my success, because you wouldn't be where you are now if he didn't kick you in the ass to like encourage you to do better and do more and prove him wrong. He lit a fire under you to get you to this point. And you may not have liked his methods, but the results are undeniable. Okay. And so just accept it. And then it happens again in I Am Kayak when he says, you know, I'll tell you what our field needs, an infusion of bright, talented people like you, Rory. And then he offers her a job basically at any of their papers, anywhere in the world. He's like, we'll take care of you. If you're going to be a part of if you're going to be a part of Logan's life, then we want to do right by you, which is huge because we see later how involved Logan's family is in selecting Odette as his life partner and the expectations put on him for his personal relationships. But at this point, they're like, nah, we're good. Like, you'd be an asset to our family. We want you to, continue to be a good influence on Logan and for you two to keep finding success together. And we're going to do what it takes to make that happen. And then Rory's just so like weirded out by this and is unwilling to see that this is an opportunity as well. She is so dubious of his motives and of the idea of marrying into the kind of lifestyle that she perceives as being necessary to marry a Huntzberger. And I feel like her mom's voice is like playing in the back of her head, like a weird little music box that just runs on a loop. And she's so dismissive of him here. And she even goes to Logan later and is just like, your dad says something really weird to me. And she just can't accept that all of this is good. She loves Logan. She wants to be with him. She wants to be a journalist. And again, silver platter, beautiful life, can't even let herself enjoy it for 5 minutes, turns Logan down, goes off, uses her connections to Logan to land a job in the first place and go off and start her career without him, without acknowledging all that he's done for her. It just leaves him in the lurch. And I just think it's so indicative of her sense of entitlement that it's just like, no, I should have everything and I shouldn't have to ask for anything. I have to do it on my own, but I still need people to hand it to me. And it's just such a bizarre mentality to have sometimes. And I will die on the hill that she should have married Logan and she would have achieved everything she ever dreamed of. But of course, there's always going to be that voice in the back of her head of, did I just get it because of Mitchum? And to that I say, who the hell cares? You have it. You got what you wanted.
Yeah. Excellent point. I mean, again, rampant nepotism is problematic for so many reasons. Not even going to get into it. But there's no shame in accepting help from other people from time to time, whether it's an employer, whether it's a friend, a family member, a partner. We're here as human beings put on this earth to be compassionate and help one another and not be jerks and just lift each other up instead of putting each other down. So yeah, I will echo your point. If you were successful as a journalist at the end of the day because early on in your career, Mitchum Huntzberger gave you a leg up, thank you and good night. Just send the man a card just being like, I appreciate what you did for me. You got me to where I needed to be. It's not always going to be about you got yourself from point A to point Z. For someone like Lorelai Gilmore, maybe a little bit more so, but we've also talked about the fact that like she shouldn't even be crediting all of her own success to her own gains because she had a large amount of help from Mia. So it's not a thing to be ashamed of to say like this person helped me and that's why like I am where I am today. Rory does it in her graduation speech. She calls out her mother saying like, I'm the person I am because of Lorelai Gilmore, because of my grandparents, because I've had people invest in my life in really substantial ways. If you can say that to them, why can't you just acknowledge what Mitchum did for you? And I mean, maybe there's always going to be a sore spot there because yeah, at a really critical moment in your life, he gave you some criticism that was hurtful that you couldn't emotionally process, but you need to build yourself back up and move on from it. And then take that into your next few endeavors. When she goes into her interview with Sandy Says, and she's largely unprepared because you, again, don't know who your boss is. You don't know who you're going to be writing for. You don't know what this company is. And she's even asked, like, what do you think we are? What do you think we write about? And she's just like, and then she goes into Condé Nast, Wall Street Journal, other internships, other career paths, writing for Naomi, which was just like, at that point, so out of left field, like, what are you even doing? You're just trying to scrape by and have anything. But the problem was that you never invested the time in knowing what your job was, what it entailed, what it was going to be expected of you, how you could do X, Y, and Z to get yourself to the point of success that you needed to have within any sort of business venture, within any sort of career path, within any sort of job. You just expected that you were going to float by whimsically, that these opportunities were going to be handed to you. And if you don't put in the work and you're not willing to accept even a modicum of help, you are never going to succeed in life. And I think that, again, if we ever get Revival 2.0, some of the biggest life lessons that I would want to see Rory Gilmore have learned is that accepting help is okay. Acknowledge that help and thank the people that have gotten you to where you need to be. And then just put it forward into the universe and continue to help others.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Nepo babies kind of pushing other people out of contention for stuff. And nepotism obviously has its downsides, but not all privilege is bad. Not all help is bad. Like you said, it's what you do with it. And just because Mitchum helped her out, or just because she has fortuitous proximity to exactly everything she's ever hoped and dreamed of, it doesn't mean she doesn't deserve it. I think there is a world in which she could develop it, the proverbial it that Mitchum speaks of. She has some of the raw capabilities, and I think with the right encouragement and the right opportunities, she would be able to be a good newspaper woman for the Huntzberger group. But she doesn't even really seriously consider it, seemingly, and it's kind of frustrating that she says this is all she wants, and yet she turns it all down. And I think that's why I feel like it's not what she wanted or needed. But I think therein lies the tension and the frustration with the characters. Like, she goes on for years and years and years about how much she wants this and how it's all she's ever dreamed of since she was 3. And then it's right there for her. And she doesn't take the opportunities presented to her, no matter who they come from. And it can be equally frustrating to see people get things that they don't deserve just because they were born into it, or they know someone who knows someone. But, when you're Rory Gilmore and this is what you claim to be your life's work and your life's dream, and you just leave it there, then I don't have a lot of sympathy for you as you go out into the world and just flounder and struggle to make things happen for yourself, because you've had so much, like, you are so lucky to be offered things like this, to be this close to opportunity and to privilege. So many people would love to be, and you won't take it because you want to feel morally superior to everybody else.
Excellent points. I would not change anything that you have just said. Anything else that you would care to add before we close this one out for this week?
Probably a gajillion things, but
that's always us.
We've already been going 30 minutes longer than we said we were going to go, because that's how we roll. So let's close this out and just remind everybody that Mitchum Huntzberger is going to be at FanFest in just a few short weeks. We will be gathered in Guildford, and hopefully nobody verbally assaults him while we're there, because he's just an actor. But he's one of 10 cast and crew members coming to Guildford, Connecticut, October 17th to 20th. I'm not sure if there are any tickets left. If there aren't, keep an eye on the Facebook group. Sometimes people have to change plans at the last minute and will want to sell off their tickets. So check the website, check the Facebook, see what the plans are. But if you can manage to snag a ticket, we highly, highly recommend this event. It's going to be awesome. It's just such a wonderful community of other Gilmore fans. There's going to be costume contests, panels with the cast and crew. We're running Gilmores Against Humanity again. There's going to be karaoke. It's just going to be such a magical weekend of Stars Hollow goodness. And we are literally counting down the days. Mentally, I am already like I've been in October since August. Actually, no, probably May. Like I've just been daydreaming about this forever. And so I really hope that if you want to come, you can come, you can talk to us. If you have any questions, let us know. Um, Again, check the Facebook group. So many people are willing to offer up all their expertise on this event, but do not hesitate to get a ticket because your chances may run out soon.
Yeah, everything she just said. If at the time that you're watching this, tickets are no longer available, we'll include links to the website in the description below so you can actually check to see if there are any. If not, absolutely hit up that Facebook planning group. There may be some last minute tickets that are available if people have to change their plans, but we can't highlight enough that this is not a weekend that you will regret whatsoever. The cast and crew are wonderful. The fan base is excellent. These are some of not even some of, I think, the most friendly people that you will ever meet. It's just the most warm, welcoming, and fun and memorable weekend you will ever have. So we hope that you will consider joining us in Connecticut this fall. We promise you won't be disappointed.
Yeah. And yeah, don't forget to smash that like button, drop us comments, share this with your other Gilmore Girl fan friends. Spread the word. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're glad that you joined us for this and that you stuck it out to the end. And we hope we'll see you again next week for dinner.
Have a good weekend, everybody, and take care. Stay safe.
Bye.